Welcome back to another Steven video. I'm your host, Steven, and today we have a great, very heavy malicious compliance story. We'll get to that story in just a bit, but first, really seals in the flavor. This story is from many years ago, from when I was 19 or 20. I used to work for a resort. The same resort, 3 separate times in many different job roles, so prepare for other stories. This was my second time working there when I did dishwashing. I kind of got the job accidentally, which is another story entirely. Anyways, they held a Hawaiian luau event, which involved renting a custom-built whole pig spit roast that fit 2 pigs. As a seasoned adult who has now enjoyed a lifetime of good barbecue, this thing was beautiful. As someone who thought they were an adult, this thing was a large inconvenience and a waste of money. I didn't get to participate in any of the food, but I did get to see the dishes. Me and my coworker went out in the loading dock to take a break as one of the chefs rolled up with a golf cart towing the big old pig cooker. There are 2 types of chefs at this resort, the cool ones and the type who was currently driving the golf cart. He lights up a cigarette and looks at the 2 of us, points at me and says, "Clean it." I walk up and take my first look inside. It looks like it's been through absolute heck. I said, "This is more than a shift worth of cleaning. I don't even know where to start." They reply, "Well, they'll be here in 3 hours to pick it up, so you better start now, and when they get here, it better shine like new." I ask them, "How do you even clean something like this?" They reply, "I don't care, just make it shine." I know I'm being set up for failure, but I knuckle down. If I work my butt off but fail in the process, I'll be in less trouble than if I just don't try at all. I brought out the big guns. I went to the supply closet and got a brand new unused floor scrub brush, all the heavy chemicals, and the garden hose. I spray the whole thing down in 4 cans of the heaviest degreaser we have, let it sit, and then literally stand inside and scrubbed. After an hour of scrubbing, I rinsed to see the progress. Not much. I go to maintenance and grab a paint scraper and some scotch pads out of their supply, another round of heavy chemicals, and I start scraping. Really making progress now. I work into a system. Chemicals, scrape, scrub, rinse. Chemicals, scrape, scrub, rinse. I am on my knees in this thing, chipping away at the crap, and I heard the dock door open. It's one of the office guys, the chef, and someone else. "Right out here, you better have it clean for ya." It's at this point I look up. The chef sees me obviously not done and has an evil grin. The office guy looks indifferent. The stranger, enraged horror. He comes running up and starts a tirade. I blank on what he says as my mind goes into survival mode. Usually people I see this angry are one really small thing away from physical violence. I don't remember the exact argument, but I do remember the guy being mad about how I was cleaning it with, "You scrubbed off the flavor," and how it was seasoned, which meant nothing to me at that point in my life. The chef chimed in with, "Why would you do this? Don't you have any common sense?" My mind comes back into focus and I say, "You said you didn't care how I cleaned it, but to make it shine like new." There was a moment of silence, and then he starts back at me, telling me that I was done here and HR would have my butt for this. Like losing this job would ruin my life. The other dishwasher, like a knight with a moist dish towel over one shoulder, appears in the doorway. The dishwasher says, "Dude, you literally told him to make it shine like new. I was standing right here." They made me stop where I was and rinse it off. We lost our deposit. I never got in trouble. Chef got his butt reamed. Things never got better there, but I felt vindicated. I'm still good friends with that other dishwasher. So I myself have never done anything other than like dishwasher duty or been a chef or used anything like a pig cooker, so I wouldn't know that there's like seasoning on a pig cooker. I would know that's the deal with a cast iron pan. Basically what I'm trying to say is, if I was in OP shoes, I wouldn't know that you're not supposed to scrub the heck out of a pig cooker. I mean, if anything, I would have figured that it would have been a good thing to get it clean. Did that level of common sense just escape me? Do other people hear really big pig cooker and think, "Oh good, I hope they leave the seasoning on"? Arakvis left a comment on the post saying, "There's a lot of stupid in this story, but the only one with brains is you." Rental company should have said, "Don't try to clean it, we know the proper procedures." All the gunk should be cleaned off and it should look like new because you never know how good of a cleaning job a renter will do, not to mention that the gunk creates weird insulating pockets that change how the unit functions over time. Seasoning a cast iron pan has nothing to do with flavor, it's about making sure the metal is intact. And speaking of intact, if you don't want me to fall apart, it would be amazing if you could hit those like or subscribe buttons down below. Our next story is, you won't let me leave when I'm obviously sick? Let's see what your boss has to say. Y'all seem to enjoy my last post about my old boss, Jack. I have a few more stories about him, and I was recently reminded of this one when my allergies began acting up. As a refresher, Jack was brought in to fix the restaurant and loved exercising his power as GM. Classic power-tripping boss who actually hates putting in the work. Anyway, a bit of context about me. At the time of this story, I was 17 working at this restaurant after school to save for college. I also get horrendous seasonal allergies to the point I have 3 bottles of industrial-strength antihistamines placed strategically, so I'm never far from my medicine. They tend to flare up without warning, so I can't just take one in the morning. Anyway, that's besides the point, since at the time of the story, I didn't take anything for my allergies. They were never severe enough to bother, and I was a broke high school student. This story would change that. Right, on to the story. I was working the drive-thru one fine fall morning, right across from a Palo Verde tree. Anyone who has had a Palo Verde tree near them, you know just how bad the pollen from those things gets in the fall. As you can imagine, after about an hour, my nose was already running something fierce. I saw where this was headed, and after blowing my nose, I went and found Jack to figure something out. Having a runny nose in food service is a bad idea, so surely he would be willing to work with me, right? Nope. I've once again overestimated Jack. I started by asking if I could simply move to another station to get away from the offending tree. No, we've got a full staff today and I'm not willing to move you around. Alright, then can I leave for just long enough to run to a corner store and pick up some over-the-counter antihistamines? No, it's company policy not to let employees leave and come back for the same shift. This one was complete BS, by the way. People left all the time when they had a long break and wanted peace and quiet to eat. By this point, I was getting confused. I was quite obviously suffering from a runny nose, even while talking to Jack, so I thought even he wouldn't be dumb enough to not throw me a bone. I asked if I could go home then, since I can't do anything else to alleviate my symptoms. Nope, I needed to stick around, dripping snot all over the counter while I talked to customers. Eventually, I realized he wasn't going to give. He wanted me to sit there and smile in spite of my visible symptoms? Fine. Cue malicious compliance. Now, something I failed to mention earlier was that I was friendly with a franchise owner, Sam, who was the only person there who outranked Jack. I also knew that part of Sam's weekly routine was to stop by this restaurant to catch up on paperwork on that day of the week during my shift. This was information Jack had as well, but I suppose he didn't consider that Sam could possibly disagree with his handling of the situation. So, I waited. I snagged a box of tissues from the staff bathroom, set myself up at my station, and worked as best I could. I made my way through that box, then a second and half of a third before Sam got there about an hour before my shift was scheduled to end. The tissues were provided by one of the shift leads, who I paid back. I felt bad using so many since Jack didn't pay for them. My throat was sore from the mucus running down it, and my voice was hoarse from pushing through it. I'm sure the customers must have thought I was coming down with a plague or something. Finally, Sam arrives. I wait patiently for him to make his rounds, checking in on all the staff, seeing how we're doing, and making small talk with the ones who weren't busy. Finally, he walks over to the drive-thru and immediately notices my condition. "OP, are you feeling okay? You don't look well," he says. I responded, "I'm hanging in there. My allergies are acting up. No big deal." Sam frowns. "You sure? This looks like more than allergies." I said, "Oh, definitely. It's that Palo Verde tree causing it. I get like this every year." He looks confused now. "Why didn't you move to a different station? Or take something for it? You can't work with food like this." "Gotcha." I said, "I asked Jack. He said I couldn't do it either and refused to send me home. I've just been trying to tough it out. boom. Sam's face contorted for a moment before straightening out into a look of grim determination. "Come with me," he says. "I'll grab someone to cover your station while we go to talk to Jack." Sam has me hand my headset to one of the aforementioned non-busy coworkers. Guess it wasn't that hard after all. Then leads me to the back office where Jack is doing whatever it is he does. Jack greets Sam, then notices me standing there and frowns. "OP, what are you doing back here? You need to stay at your station," Jack admonishes. Before I can respond, Sam cuts in with a stern, "I had someone cover him." "Why did you keep him on the drive-thru when the tree was making his allergies act up like this?" Jack started with the same excuses he gave me, but Sam cut him off. "We're not even that busy. You could have easily have moved OP or sent him home." Once again, Jack tried to justify his decision. "Well, I asked the other employees and none of them wanted to swap." At this, Sam turned to me and said, "I'm sending you home. You are in no state to finish your shift. I'm sorry you even had to stay this long." I thanked him and turned to leave. Unfortunately, Sam closed the office door, so I didn't get to eavesdrop on the ensuing conversation. I clocked out and immediately booked it to the corner store and slammed down some medicine to stop the runny nose. Long story short, when I proceeded to develop a lingering cough that stuck around for a significantly long time, I went to urgent care to get it checked out. As it turns out, a lot of that mucus I inhaled ended up in my lungs and I had pneumonia. Neat! So, after ending up on a doctor-prescribed day of rest, a dose of steroids, and a bottle of horse pills that I took for a week, I was cured. To this day, I carry antihistamines with me so it never gets that far again. As for Jack, well, nothing happened to him as far as I could tell. That situation did get an honorable mention at the next staff meeting though. Sam mentioned that employees should not be coming to work sick, and that any employees who develop symptoms while on the clock should be sent home. Go figure. Sadly, the well was poisoned for me after that, and I quickly found a new job where I was much happier. Jack's still working there to this day, though from what I hear, he's getting ready to quit so he can move to another country to be with his girlfriend. My heart goes out to that poor woman. Anyway, I'll try to remember more Jack stories. I've got more, I just have to remember them. All this happened well over a year ago at minimum, so a lot of details have gotten foggy. See y'all next time. You know, I feel like I say it quite a lot, but I'm no expert in how fast you can catch pneumonia. But if I'm understanding correctly, OP said they went to work one day, were profusely snotting, and all it took was however long they were on shift to catch pneumonia. I guess not all cases are created equal, but I would have thought it would have been a little bit harder to just get pneumonia like that. And I'm not saying that to doubt OP or anything, I just find it surprising. Illuminatus Prime left a comment saying, "Just imagine a drive-thru customer writing a review about a certain fast food restaurant manager allowing a plague-ridden employee to sneeze and snarls all over their order, their car, their change, and themselves." Not that OP did any of this, but you know how disgruntled reviewers can exaggerate things. Priceless. Our next story is another story of a manager getting their well-deserved malicious compliance. I was going to type this in a comment on the post about the guy with the bad allergies that told the boss about it so their manager got scolded, but I figured I didn't want to take over their post. This is a two-part malicious compliance. Sorry for the long post. That story reminded me of a story of my own. This happened over 23 years ago when I was pregnant. I worked in a grocery store, and I was supposedly a front-end leader. Supposedly, because as soon as the manager got informed of my pregnancy, he put me to work as a cashier while the cashier supervised me. This will be the second part of my story. Part 1, I usually had the early morning opening shift at 6 a.m., so I was usually the only person at the checkout for the first 3 hours. There was only one person at the office, one manager, and one cashier until 9 a.m. So one morning, I had a sharp pain on the side of my belly, and being young with no Google and no one to ask about it, of course I worried, plus the pain wasn't going away. So after a bit, I called the store manager and told him I wasn't feeling good, I had a sharp pain, and wanted to leave to go to the doctor. He said I couldn't leave because there was no other cashier, I had to wait until 9 a.m. and left. It was like 6:30 at that point, so a long wait for someone pregnant, on their feet, and in pain. The HR office was located behind our store, so it was common for HR employees to be getting coffee or whatever at our store, and they were always being annoying about how we had to smile and do this and that for the customers. So a few minutes later, an HR woman comes and I'm ringing her up. I told her good morning, but I was serious, not smiling. She started scolding me about, "Oh, where's your smile, blah blah blah." So I told her calmly, "Well, I can't smile because I'm pregnant and in pain. I told my manager about it over an hour ago, but he told me I can't leave because there's no other cashier to take over until 9 a.m. Her smile quickly changed, she got ticked, and asked the office person to call the manager now. When he came, oh my god, he got a terribly satisfying scolding. She even started raising her voice at him, how this was unacceptable. If there was no other cashier, he had to take over the checkout and let me go. There was no ands, ifs, or buts. I took out the money, dropped it at the office, and was out of there in less than 10 minutes. Part 2, this actually started before the part 1, but I left it for the end because it covers a longer time frame. Remember how I said I was a front-end leader? When I started working at the store, I came in with the best possible attitude and ready to not make the same errors I made in my first job because I wanted to be promoted. I was quickly moved to front-end leader, so I thought my change of attitude paid off. Right after I got the new role, I was warned by an older guy coworker in the produce section to be careful with that manager because he likes women like you. I've always been drooled over by men since my teens, so this was not unheard of. I thanked my coworker quietly and continued on with my day without telling others what he told me. As the weeks and months passed, I always asked for feedback on my job because I was new at this. And like I said, I didn't want to make the same mistakes. My manager always told me I was doing perfect, I had absolutely nothing to correct. I always worked 40 hours without missing days up to this point. I was so happy and proud of myself, I didn't want to mess it up. So I kept doing what I was doing. A few months later, I got pregnant. After a few weeks, I informed the manager. This is when things started to change. Suddenly, I was not supervising the front end. Instead, I was in the checkout while the cashier supervised me. My hours got cut too. I went from 40 hours to less than 20. After a few weeks of this, I asked my manager what was going on, and after back and forth of him trying to gaslight me with, "Everyone here has to work whatever position it's needed. So if you're needed as a cashier, that's why you're at the checkout," ignoring the fact that a perfectly available cashier was already there doing my job. After I kept insisting for an answer, he blurted out, "You have to be more reasonable. It's easier to replace a cashier that calls out for being sick than replacing a team leader." Like I said, up to this point, I had 0 absences. I left there that day holding back tears. So, cue malicious compliance. After that, I started missing days for every minor thing. Not sure how it is in the US, but where I'm from, there is, or was, a law that pregnant women can't be fired for basically no reason. So I knew he couldn't fire me. I never called that I wasn't coming either. I simply did not arrive and left them scrambling to find a cashier at that 6 a.m. shift with no one else. Whenever I arrived, they welcomed me with a warning to sign because I didn't call. They kept telling me I just had to call and wouldn't get a warning. I sat there very nonchalantly and rebuffed all their suggestions. When they said I should call, I said, "I don't have a phone. I don't make enough to pay for one since my hours got cut." Then I would be told, "Just go to a payphone and call us." And I replied, "I'm pregnant and can't be walking to a payphone as I don't feel good, and I have no money for a car since my hours got cut." Ironically, while they all saw my car parked right there at the store, then they would say, "You can ask a neighbor to use their phone and call us." And I would say, "I don't talk to my neighbors." I became super smug about this whole situation. I signed every warning, but I knew they had to tolerate my butt at least until I gave birth, so I didn't care. And if they dared fire me, I would simply sue them. We were unionized too, so I wasn't going to lose that battle. When I finally decided to grace them with my presence, I took every possible break in a 4-hour shift. I kept complaining about being hungry and dizzy, I needed food and to sit down. They looked at the long lines and knew I was the faster cashier there and tried to ignore me, but I just kept pushing until they told me to just go quickly to grab a bite, but don't take long, please. I went to the deli, ordered a sandwich, sat my butt down with a newspaper, and spent my sweet time reading all the news and talking to the older customers that also spent their mornings there with their coffee and newspaper. They kept asking me to hurry up and return to the checkout. I eventually did, and within a few minutes, I would ask to go to the restroom and spend like 15 plus minutes there, only to repeat the cycle with the food later, etc. So I took at least 2 to 3 food breaks and 3 plus restroom breaks in a 4-hour shift. I can estimate I didn't actually work more than 2 hours on every 4-hour shift. Then I missed 2 plus shifts afterwards. I basically worked 1 shift and missed 2 all the pregnancy. I made their life heck those 9 months. But it was fine because I recall the manager saying it was easier to replace a cashier than to replace a team leader. Of course, I eventually gave birth, so I couldn't get away with missing days without calling, so I just called. But then hung up after saying I wasn't coming and before the manager answered the phone. They didn't like that either, so they kept giving me warnings because I had to talk to the manager. But they still couldn't fire me because I was technically following the rules. I didn't stay long after my son was born. I left in the same manner, didn't give them 2 weeks notice, just dropped the resignation letter one day. I got tired of their crap and left right then and there. Once again, we recently had a whole discussion about cashiers and sitting down. I remember Poppyfield left a comment saying that in the UK they can use chairs. The Mimisard, the Howling Gamer, left comments that mentioned that at Aldi's you can use chairs. OP in this post said it didn't even take place in the US and they couldn't have a chair. A pregnant woman can't sit down? Alaskan Druid left a comment saying, for future reference, 1. Never ever sign write-ups, it doesn't matter if they're valid or not. 2. It is the manager's job to work the position themselves if there's nobody else to do it. No other cashier? Too bad. Manager needs to work the till. This next story is, angry boss refuses expense claim and tells me to read the policy for guidance. England 2015, I was sent on a week-long mandatory training course through work. I already knew the subject backwards, but my boss wanted me to get the certificate to prove to upper management that his team was 100% certified. I was told that a train ticket would be booked, as would a hotel, bed and breakfast only. I would have to pay for lunch and evening meals, but I would be able to claim up to £5 per day for lunch and $11.72 per day for evening meals. It was a really strange value, but I could eat easily within that limit. On the last night at the hotel, my food bill was $11.75, 3 pence more than allowed. However, seeing as on the other nights I'd barely spent 10, I chanced that I could talk the finance people into approving it as the total spend would still be less than allowed for the week. The Monday I returned, I completed the expense form with the receipts and handed it to my boss for approval. An hour later, I was summoned to his office. He flatly refused to sign off on the expenses as I had overspent. When I tried to explain that it was by 3 pence and that on the Monday night I'd actually underspent by $2.50, I was lectured as to the reason that the limits were there and to read the policy. He sent me back to my desk and told me to resubmit. Cue malicious compliance. I read the policy regarding expenses, then I read the staff handbook and my contract. As it turned out, I could claim for the following: reasonable costs for calling my family in the evening, no receipt required; £5 per night for being away from my family, no receipt needed; one-off £30 for being more than 3 hours travel, offered as incentive. Regardless of time spent on course, it was equivalent to 40 hours, my standard was 37. Travel to and from the venue was classified as being in work. That was overtime as it was out of hours and double for the Sunday. Friday, as I was late home, was considered an overnight stay. I resubmitted, making the adjustments and highlighting the sections of the policies. Where I had expected around £75 in expenses, with the extras in the policies, I claimed for an extra $100. Then filled in the timesheet for the travel overtime, which granted me an additional $150 or so. The boss called me back into the office and tried to tell me that he wouldn't sign off on it, but I referred him to the policies and simply told him that if he refused, I would go above him and maybe submit a formal complaint about him. I did take great satisfaction in reminding him that if he hadn't told me to read the policies, then I'd never have found out about all the extras. Yes, I did inform every one of my work friends. Yes, I did get all the claimed funds in my next paycheck. I think this just goes to show two things. One, if you're employed somewhere and you have like a staff policy or handbook, especially with like finances, claims, a lot of times even like the outfit you can wear, it's worth taking a once over with a pen and paper, see what's there. The other thing is, if you're a company and you have a policy handbook, maybe once a year, go back through and just, reevaluate everything. I bet a few of the things OP discovered were kind of holdovers that they just haven't updated. I mean, even by 2015, costs for calling your family in the evening, it's certainly nice to have it covered, but by 2015, I wouldn't be surprised if they wanted to remove that. Subjective Assertive left a comment on OP's post saying, £12 for an evening meal even 10 years ago is bloody tight. When was that policy last updated? OP responded, I don't work there anymore, but the place I now work for has a £45 per evening meal expense and £20 for lunch. Our next story is a heavy compliance. Almost 2 decades ago, I took some years away from my certified profession of electric stuff to operate heavy machinery at an industrial site. Wheel loaders and excavators to be precise. Fun stuff. You get paid good money to play around with big yellow toys. One of the tasks was loading building rubble onto 2 trucks. Concrete bits, dirt, bricks, heavy and dense stuff. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think we put around 14 tons net weight on the truck and 20 on the trailer, it being lighter. I handled many trucks a shift, and all the drivers were nice folks, with an exception, hence the story. The loader I was driving was a Volvo L110, lifting capacity 11 tons including bucket, which was around 2 tons, so 9 tons left for the materials if full. And the usual load was 2 not quite full scoops on the truck and 3 on the trailer, or thereabouts. Enter our antagonist, the truck driver, drives up along the ramp and walks up to me. I open the cabin door to ask how much to load. He says, 4 on the truck and 5 on the trailer. I say, isn't that a bit much? We usually do 2 and 3. He snaps back, I said 4 on the truck and 5 on the trailer. Closing the door again, I thought, who am I to tell you what's good for you and your truck? You clearly know best. Demand and you shall receive. So I drove around the site to the rubble pile, and instead of gently filling the bucket as usual, I drove into the pile as far as I could while tipping up to really fill it, then tipping it back and shaking it to pack the stuff, and proceeded to repeat this a second time. Rated lifting capacity was 11 tons. What the loader would actually lift was a different matter. I had at least 11 tons of material alone. The machine barely had any weight on the rear wheels. After gingerly driving back to keep the rear wheels on the ground and tipping it into the truck, I repeated the process at least twice more. I can't remember how many shovels I got into the car and trailer before the driver was back, red in the face and practically screaming. Details of that conversation have been lost to time. I do know he had to drive around the site and dump all of it off before I loaded him up again. Less material this time. Wake Me Up 3000 left a comment on the post saying, I once watched a guy at one of the big box stores berate an employee for not using the forklift to load paving stones onto his pickup truck bed. Decided to stick around because I knew it was going to be interesting. Demanded a supervisor who said the same thing. Load was too heavy for the truck. He insisted. They had him sign paperwork verifying that this was his decision to have this done. Forklift lowered the pallet of pavers onto the truck bed, and the shock and horror on the truck guy's face was so worth sticking around to see. Our next story is, expense report you say? So many years ago, I worked for a large municipal fire department. Took a 3-day training assignment about 4 hours away from home, drove my own car there and back. As instructed, saved all my receipts, gas, meals, and lodging. When I got back, I filled out the requisite paperwork for expenses, uploaded receipts, and filled out said form with my actual expenses. Came out to be around $375. Submitted it to accounting. Next day, I get an email from them. I need to recode the receipts and delve how I did the form. Okay, I do that. The next day, I get another email. I didn't label the travel correctly. Instead of actual fuel used, they have a formula at some gas price, and I have to calculate it based on mileage. Okay, did that. Instead of what I should have actually been paid, wound up being paid at least double. Next day, it was the hotel. Instead of getting paid what I actually spent, I get paid per a predetermined amount. Okay, several more corrections, and you didn't fill this out correctly, and I went from getting reimbursed around $375 to being paid almost $900 for the training. Not sure if it's malicious per se, but I did exactly what the accounting person said and made almost 3 times what I spent, plus my hourly pay. Crazy. All I can say is if I were in a situation like that and I realized the figures are adding up to like 3 times what I'm supposed to get paid, I'm gonna be sitting there crunching the numbers over and over again because in my mind I'm like, oh, well, I screwed something up. Every time I had to submit a paycheck, if I kept getting paid that much more, I feel like I would go about my days worrying that I'm gonna eventually get put in handcuffs for some kind of fraud that I didn't mean to do. Now, if you want to hear another malicious compliance story that feels like getting away with fraud, why not check out that video on the left? Or I promise there'll be no handcuffs if you check out my latest video on the right. That said, I'll see you all next time with some more stories.